Hey, rookies, and welcome back to the Rookie Farmer Podcast. Come on, let's all say it together. The home of the dreamers, the schemers, and the hustlers here in the world of small scale agriculture. If you're new here, my name is Alec. I am going to be your host, and I'm also the grower here at Crop Culture Farm in New Bern, Georgia. All right, folks, we're coming at you again with a farm vlog episode. I believe this is numero cinco, number 5. Once again, really loving doing these episodes. Really like having a chance to just talk to you guys directly. You guys seem to be enjoying them because I'm getting a lot of feedback on them. So in this episode, we're going to do a little bit of a farm update. I'm going to give you my promised Sumi Soaker full review after I've used it for a few weeks now. And we're going to do a breakdown of the day in the life at the farmer's market. We'll do it from the kind of some prep on Friday and then all the way through Saturday, just to give you guys an idea. I had a couple of you guys ask about it of how do we set things up, sort of what's the mentality and what does a full market day look like. So we'll get into all that in this farm blog episode. So first things first, let's jump in with a little bit of housekeeping as usual. You guys are being amazing. You're giving me tons of feedback on the podcast. I couldn't be more grateful. I believe that this episode right here will episode number 14. Can't believe we've done 14 episodes of the podcast. It's been so amazing. I did so much work at the beginning of the season to just compile episodes and try to find people to do it. It was so much work. And then we've taken a little bit of a break on recording new episodes, other than these ones that I try to do pretty consistently, just a week or two before they air so that all the content is relevant. But it's good to be back in the saddle. We're getting some more episodes going. Just recorded in one, and I've got like 4 or 5 scheduled in the upcoming weeks. Some of them are super, super pumped about. One, it's a farmer that I've known for a while, and I've been following his stuff, and he's appeared on several other podcasts that I listen to all the time, and so I feel really excited that I get to interview this guy. I'm not going to give it away, but I will give you a couple of hints, and if anybody can guess it, then guess I'll give you a prize. I don't know what to do, but if you can guess it, I'll be impressed. So I'll give you 3 hints. 1, he's a farmer in Georgia. 2, he's been on the Regenerative Agriculture podcast with John Kempf. And 3, he does not grow veg. There's your 3 hints. If you can guess who our upcoming guest may be, which I haven't even recorded yet. So if things fall through, then I guess it's totally defunct. But if you can guess who this upcoming guest will be, I'll give you a good thumbs up and a pat on the back. But anyways, yeah, you guys have been doing amazing feedback with the podcast. I really hope that you're sharing this. I hope that you're sending out to other people who are interested in agriculture, interested in starting a farm, because that's the whole point. It's not just to be an entertaining thing, but we want to spread the word. We want to encourage and educate as many people as we can to get into this farm agricultural space. There's no more important time than now with like food insecurity and supply chain issues and tariffs and uncertainty about so many different things, to be able to close the loop on our local food system and ensure that we can feed people with the things that are coming from our backyards, from our land, from the places down the road from us is super important. On an episode I just recorded, we go into a lot of detail about seasoning and herbs and how that's another product that we can create and we can sell that is completely ubiquitous. It's in every kitchen. It's on every shelf in the grocery store. Yet none of us are really doing herbs and dried herbs and seasoning blends. Yeah, it just got me thinking about being able to close the loop on our food system. So yeah, please share this episode with someone who's either a farmer already that just needs another podcast to listen to, maybe some encouragement, or to commiserate with some other farmers who are going through the same struggles as they are. Or if it's someone who wants to become a farmer, maybe this will be the spark. This will be the impetus for them to finally take the leap and get started, maybe sign up and do a farmer's market next year or something. But yeah, share these episodes. All right, let's jump in with a little bit of a farm update here at our farm, Crop Culture Farm. So on the last episode, we discussed some of the things like how has it been going with a new employee And we've got the walk-in cooler going now, and some of the things with the connections at the farmers market. And I don't really have much new to report on that side of things. It's just more of the same, just continuing to refine the processes. We went through a big renovation project with the barn space as a part of that walk-in cooler thing, and there was stuff strewn all over the place under canopies and in carports and things as we tried to reorganize. So we've been that reorganization process, and now we're just in full blown growing season mode. Everything is growing at the rate in the way that it should be. We're definitely out of winter. We're in like 75, 85 degree days pretty much every single day. Even on the overcast, gloomy, stormy days, it's still staying pretty warm. We're not really getting anything below the mid 50s at night at this point. You know, I'm recording this on the end of April. So yeah, we're kind of fully into spring, and summer is just around the corner. And so we're just like trying to get dialed in as much as we can. We're just trying to be as focused and as intentional with the time that we have to just get plants in the ground, get stuff harvested in an efficient and timely manner, then get beds flipped and move on to the next thing. But one of the big hurdles that we've been having is just cultivation, keeping beds weeded. It always happens about this time of year. I feel like we always get a few flushes. There's like the midsummer grass flush. It's kind of what I call it, where I feel like a lot of those really serious grasses try to pop up. And then there's like the fall, winter weed flush of like all the henbit and the chickweed and stuff like that. And right now we're in that spring weed flush. There's like tons of amaranth, pigweed, horse nettle, and crabgrass, and it's kicking my butt right now. And we're just trying to take every little bit of free time we can and just pull weeds on a bed, or just run the collinear hoe through a bed of lettuce or something, just to try to stay on top of it. Because as I speak, there's a couple of beds of peppers that are doing their best to try to outcompete some of those weeds in our new tunnel. That area hasn't been cultivated for a long time, and even when it wasn't really weeded properly. And a lot of stuff was just sort of allowed to grow up, and then they would just kind of bush hog it down, till it in, and then go on. So we're dealing with a pretty substantial weed seed bank, and it's going to take a lot of time to sort of deal with that through our no-till practices. But we're getting there. We're getting there. So we'll just stay on top of weeding, stay on top of cultivating. I'm trying to come up with some sort of a system to stay on top of bed cultivation, so that we don't get we're not just putting out fires like, oh, we got to weed this bed before it gets choked out, so on and so forth. I've tried to come up with like maybe like Weeds Day Wednesday sort of thing, where we do a lot of weeding on Wednesday, but I'm there by myself on Wednesdays, and usually I'm trying to tackle some other more high value projects. So I don't know if we could do like Tuesday Tills Day. I don't have to come up with a funny name, but in my head, that's the best way to do it. We can't do Weeds Day Tuesday. That doesn't really rhyme, except for well, I guess it does rhyme, but that's just because it's the same word. It's day both times. But you know what I'm saying. But anyways, I'm going to stay on top of weeding. And speaking of those peppers, our summer annuals are really jamming right now. They've been in the ground for about a month. The tomatoes and peppers and eggplant, summer squash. We just got some basil planted in the ground. So we're in like full blown getting stuff in the ground for summer production. And it feels good. It feels good to kind of take a little bit of a break from those long, slower growing winter brassicas and things like that, which we still have, and they're doing great. But it's nice to see some like really quick, rapidly growing crops that I know are going to be super delicious and amazing. Like, God, I can't wait for the first tomato off the farm. It's going to be so amazing. I'm really excited about it. It's that same cycle of beginning to pivot my thinking, begin to pivot the way that I think about the farm. It's less of like get a crop in the ground and grow it up and then harvest it and then boom, do a bed flip. Now it's like, all right, these plants are going to be with us for several months. We need to make sure we're pruning the tomatoes. We need to make sure that we're getting them strung up properly, and that all of the areas around them remain weed free, and that the crops that are being interplanted next to them are not out competing, and that we're keeping plenty of airflow. It's just as you get through the rhythm and the beat of the changing of the seasons, to remind yourself that there's a new mindset, there's a new way of thinking, there's sort of new procedures that happen with that, and we're definitely in that mode. So I think that's about it for a farm update. There's not too much going on. Oh, one last thing. We started doing some plant sale for the first time. We never really did it last year. I haven't tried it in years past before we were at the farmer's market, but we had way more tomatoes than I could have done, and we had up potted a bunch of them into some 4-inch pots before we transplanted them out. And I had 2 trays of those, and I think each one holds like 16 plants, I believe, and they're really tall. They're already starting to put out some flowers, and so wanted to get those somewhere. And I didn't really have a place for them. We're already pretty much maxed out as far as the tomatoes that we have, and I don't want to have more than I really need or more than I can really manage. And so, yeah, just took a couple of flats of those tomato plants to the market for like $6 a piece. And I thought maybe we'll sell a couple. And I think I sold an entire flat. These like really wonderful big heirlooms called striped German. It's a Johnny's variety, kind of an older heirloom, really great, like bicolor with like the red and the yellow. And so it's really cool to be able to sell some plants. One, it's a good way to make a little extra cash, kind of pad those farmers market numbers, as well as be able to help people produce some of their own food. With these programs like Wholesome Wave, where people can double their EBT dollars. One of the things that they can actually do is not only can they buy produce and double it, but they can actually use that same doubled money to actually buy plants so they can grow their own food. So not only are we able to help people in need by giving them super nutrient dense food that is picked at the absolute point of perfect ripeness and freshness and nutrient density, but also now that we can help empower them to take those things home and to plant their own garden, maybe plant their very first tomato plant and harvest their very first tomato themselves. So that's really cool to be able to be a part of that with Wholesome Wave, which we might be able to be talking with the folks at Wholesome Wave here soon. So stay tuned later on in the season, and we potentially drop an episode with the folks at Wholesome Wave Georgia to learn more about this doubling up of EBT dollars and all the amazing programs that they have going on. And the last little update here is on the farmers market. We had a really awesome last couple of weeks. I think this week we broke our $1,000 sales goal for the week for the first time in probably about a month. Probably closer to a month and a half between farmers market sales and then restaurant sales. We've sort of been hovering about 800, 850, three-quarters of that coming from the farmers market. And then just as some of those fruiting crops like snap peas are coming in, tomato plant sale, and just a larger abundance of stuff at the market with these nice warm spring temperatures, things have really started picking up. So I'm happy to be getting in some more sales. It makes me feel a little bit better about the bottom line and the budget, because God knows there's always stuff that needs to be purchased, and it can be tough when you look at that number in the bank account and you're like, oof, don't know if we can afford shade cloth, but we have to have it. So being able to know that we've got some better sales coming in, and that hopefully we'll just continue to increase and get better sales as we come into the summertime. So yeah, with that, let's transition out of the farm update and let's get into the Sumi Soaker review. All right. So if you haven't heard, which if this episode comes out when I believe it'll come out, the last episode you would have listened to last week was my interview with the one and only Diego Footer of Modern Grower fame and Farm Podcast fame and Permaculture Voices fame. And one of the things that we talked about in that episode was this amazing new product that they've released and they're starting to sell, which is called the Sumi Soaker. It is a Japanese produced irrigation system that apparently farmers and landscapers and turf managers have been using for forever over there. Really great system that gets water in a really gentle, even rectangle, which is really the whole selling point, where everything like wobblers or emitters or sprinklers, whatever they may be, they always water in a circle. It just seems to be a pretty efficient way to throw water in every direction, but none of us really grow in circles. We all grow in lines, we grow in rectangles. And so being able to have something that can emit water in a perfect rectangular shape that is the length of our beds, the length of our blocks, is really, really wonderful. And I've got my hands on the Sumi Soaker, been using it for a couple of weeks, and we're going to kind of give you the ins and outs of what I think about it, how I've been using it, sort of the pros and the cons, and why you should maybe consider getting it yourself. And in full disclosure, Diego did send me one to trial. And so, just wanted to lay that out there. But I was planning on buying 1 or 2 regardless because that's the first real selling point of this is that it's the price point. I believe it's just north of $100 for the 100-foot roll, which is considering that it does, essentially a block of about 8 beds, with each bed being, 30 inches plus an 18-inch pathway, you're watering a pretty significant amount of square footage with almost zero infrastructure. You don't need a bunch of hoses. You don't need a bunch of piers to put your wobblers up, and you have to move everything and all this. It's essentially you just kind of roll it out, hook it up, turn it on, and then boom, you're ready to go. So it's less material, less stuff to store. I can essentially take something that will water 100 feet by 8 beds, and I can hold it in my hands, and it's not much bigger than the size of a basketball, which is really wonderful. It's easy to, throw it on a shelf, stick it in a drawer, whatever you need to do to get it out of the way. But the truth of the matter is, it doesn't really get put up because it's getting used. So it's always staying out. It's always being moved from one spot to another. But just the fact that it's so inexpensive for the quality and the amount of work that it does is really, really amazing. Because all of us know, and I believe we talked about it in that episode with Diego, is that it's important to invest in good infrastructure. It's important to invest in good tools because they really make a difference. And this is a bit of a win-win in the sense of it's a really good, high quality, effective tool that also doesn't break the bank, which is a nice change of pace compared to a lot of the other kit in market gardening, which is so specialized, it's so well built, but you got to pay for it. And so this is a nice little reprieve from that to get a good deal on the thing. But anyways, let's get into kind of how it works and how we're using it. So it's a long flat piece of tubing. When it's not in use, it's completely flat. It's not much thicker than 2 or 3 credit cards. It's really thin, and one side has, like, laser precision made holes, like, really tiny little pinholes in it that allow it to emit water, and essentially what you do is it's about, I don't know, 3 inches wide, and the one that I have is 100 feet long, and so you roll it out in the pathway, usually think of, all right, I have these 4 beds on this side and these 4 beds on that side that I want to water. So we're going to put it right in the middle. You roll it out all the way to the end. There's a small plastic block with slots in it that you sort of feed it through. If you ever had one of those belts that have like the D rings on the end of it, and you sort of feed your belt through, and that's how you cinch it tight. It's the same sort of concept. So you feed the end of the hose through it, and then kind of cinch it down to block it off and to stop it up. And what I like to do is I like to put a stake in that block. There's a hole in it just to make sure that everything's like nice and straight. It doesn't blow around. It doesn't get twisted up. And then it's 100 feet long. So it goes the full length of our beds. And then at the end of it, you have the plastic pieces with the filter sock inside of it, which is one of those things that I'm so grateful that it comes with. I don't know what everyone else's situation is water-wise, but, we're not on municipal water, we're on a well, and our well is really heavy iron, which means we get a lot of iron and rust deposits in our water, and so I pretty much have to have filters on everything. The sinks that we use for wash pack, those have a big canister filter on it. All of the sprayers inside the greenhouse for our seed propagation have filters on it to keep all that particulate out of the water. And the one area that doesn't really get filtered just because it's getting so much water and there's not a real effective way to do it is irrigating out in the field. And so being able to have a filter built in to the Sumi Soaker makes my life easier because I know that all that particulate's not going to get caught in those tiny little pinholes, and it's also not going to be just like throwing all those deposits everywhere because we've had that problem with our drip tape where it likes to sort of clog up with some of that residue, and that's basically impossible to unclog. You basically use it until you can't really use it anymore, and then you throw it away and have to buy new stuff. So being able to know that I can just go through, clean out a filter or buy a new filter is definitely a big labor saver and increases the quality of what we're doing with it. So really grateful for that. Anyways, and then you take the hose and you essentially fit it into sort of like a barbed end, similar to like where your drip tape attaches to the header pipe. It's the same sort of concept, just a lot bigger. And then you screw it down with a collar and you're essentially ready to go. Now, I will say one of the things about it that I didn't know when I got it, and maybe it was on the website and I just missed it, is that you do have to buy the necessary fittings to attach it to your water line. So if you're using a hose, the proper thread size that's on a garden hose, it's not just like plug and play. It takes a little bit of working. And I believe from what the directions have recommended and what I've seen some other people doing, is they also recommend a ball valve, some sort of a way that you can turn the water on or off or adjust the flow. So I did have to go to the hardware store. I had to buy some of the fittings to fit the larger, I believe it was 3/4 or it was 1/2 inch. I can't remember off the top of my head. Threaded end of the actual Sumi Soaker itself. And then go from there to a ball valve and then down to the actual garden hose thread size. So it took a little bit of like working, but thankfully there's directions in the package that sort of tell you what you need and a rough way that you can set it up. And the nice thing is if you do have like maybe a unique way of setting up water, like maybe you have large flat hose that you can move water all over the farm and then you can branch off smaller lines from there. Maybe you can build the exact proper attachment that you need to hook your Sumi Soaker up to make it modular or whatever you need to. So in a way, the fact that it doesn't come just ready to go into a garden hose is a benefit because it means that you can customize it exactly how you want it, which is what we did. And so you build that whole thing, you screw it in, screw your hose in, and then all you do is you just turn it on and then you're done. It's one hose that goes 100 feet. You turn it on. It takes a minute to fill up and pressurize, and then it starts spitting out water. And at first you're like, "Okay, what's the big deal?" And then once it fully reaches its pressure, which it doesn't need a ton of pressure. It's not like you have to have super great head pressure on your well, or you have to have really good water pressure from the city. It can handle, relatively low pressure, which is really nice. So you could use it on this block while maybe you're running the drip on another one. It creates a lot of versatility, and then it just puts out this fine, fine little shower. Like I said, 4 beds in one direction, 4 beds in the other. So we can do an 8-bed block at one single watering. I would say it sprays up maybe 6 feet in the air at the absolute peak, maybe even closer to 5 feet. And so it puts larger streams that go all the way out to the end. And based upon the size of the holes and sort of the orientation of them, it's able to effectively water the beds at the very end as well as the beds right there next to it. So you're not getting like big wet spots like you get with wobblers or with emitters where the emitters cross, you have these really overly saturated areas while the areas just around the post or where it connects to the hose is a little drier, which we've had that experience a lot with our emitters when we're watering in freshly seeded beds. This is like a really even, nice watering across the whole thing. Now, I know something Diego's talked about, and I've experienced it myself, is that if it's a windy day, it's really hard to use. The watering is so fine and it comes out so small that it can really blow it around. So, if you know that it's going to be a windy day, maybe hold off. Wait until the wind's going to die down. Do it at a different time of the day, maybe before the day heats up and those winds start picking up. But yeah, it waters everything super evenly and it's from end to end. So there's no like areas where maybe this emitter stops working or it gets clogged. It's consistent from top to bottom, front to back. And so we are able to do a lot of overhead watering, which I'm really excited about for the summertime because, one thing that we need overhead water for is to be able to keep like our lettuces and our greens cool in the heat of the summer. Down here in Georgia, we're easily going to be hitting mid 90s to cracking, triple digits at times in the summertime. It's super hot, it's super humid. And if we want to ever consider doing things like lettuce or arugula or any of our baby mustards throughout the summertime, we really need to make sure that we can give them a quick shot of water once or twice in the hot part of the day. And instead of running big impact sprinklers or emitters all over the place and just constantly moving things around, I can sort of plan out my blocks, plan out my plantings to where all of those sort of things are moving together or theoretically moving together so that I know that this section here can all get handled with one Sumi at one time. So you can hook it up, have it set to a timer if you're out doing something else, maybe you're running a delivery into town or picking up supplies and you don't have to worry about it. And then boom, that thing kicks on. It gives a nice gentle mist. It's not going to splash a bunch of soil up onto the bottom leaves of your plants, which is another huge problem with wobblers. Sometimes they can just really pummel your leaves and throw a ton of dirt up onto the plant when it's just hitting it with those big droplets. And so with this, it's just going to be a nice, super fine mist that's going to give it just a nice little touch of a break from the heat. But then also, you're not so overly saturating that it's just going to be totally sopping wet. So you're just giving them a cool down and then it can evaporate, which is also really aiding in the cooling, that evaporative cooling. And then you can do that a couple of times and then you're good to go. So maybe once we get into the summer months, I'll give a little bit of an update on how we're using the Sumi in the summertime. But right now, the biggest way that we're using it is not really as like a full overhead irrigation system. We run drip tape. Feel like it's extremely efficient. It keeps water out of the pathways. It keeps from the whole bed germinating weed seeds as much. If I can keep the water right where the plants are, it's a little bit less that I have to cultivate. But we're experimenting with right now is turning down the water pressure, turning down the flow, and actually using it as like a more precision tool. I'm still working it out between sort of like the water pressure coming from the spigot and then adjusting the ball valve, finding that right mix. Because if you don't have enough pressure, it's just going to sort of dribble out and not really do what it needs to do. But if you have too much, you're going to be watering more than you're intending to water. So on our farm, I'm still not really dialed in on all of the specifics of like, all right, this block gets planted in this, and then we move from block to block to block. A lot of times we're still sort of putting things in when beds become available, which means sometimes we're just seeding a single bed with crops on either side that are either being harvested or they're in their growth stage before they're being harvested. And so we don't necessarily want to like throw a ton of water on a plant of, you know, beets or something while I'm trying to water in a freshly seeded bed of arugula. Um, and right now we use our flexible pipe with the emitters, barb, stuck into it. And those can be a bit of a nightmare because they get clogged. They don't water evenly. They water in a circle. They can overly saturate the pathways and make things a muddy mess. And so we're experimenting with being able to put it in the pathway. And even though we can't water one bed at a time, I mean, guess theoretically we could stick it on top of the bed because it's so light and you don't have to stick any barbs in there or any stakes into the ground. You could just roll it over top of the bed, turn it on, let it water the single bed, and then turn it off. We'll have to experiment a little bit more with that. But as of now, we can just water two beds at a time, and just kind of be selective on, if something to one side of the arugula seeded bed needs something or doesn't, you can sort of let one side be the sacrificial side that can handle the water. And then so we're just trying to lower that water pressure so that we can essentially just water two beds instead of eight. If we can figure that out, that will be amazing because it is so much easier to take this flat hose and roll it up into something roughly about the size of a volleyball or a basketball, as opposed to this massive loop of flexible pipe with all of these emitters on stakes that have to go and get stuck in the ground. And then if you pull it, it shifts them all to one direction and then they're not spraying properly. It can really be a pain in the neck. And so being able to have something that is really modular, just roll it all the way out, hook it up, do its thing, that will definitely be a big, big lifesaver. Yeah, I've been really happy with it. I think that it might become one of those things that is really a game changer. I think every few years things come along that really make a big difference. I think the paper pot and the Jang were some of those. Obviously, those have been around well before I started, but I see how they've really changed the game for a lot of people. And I'm hoping that this will be the next one. I hope this will be the one thing where it's like, oh man, like you have to have the Sumi. You have to have the Sumi Soaker on your farm if you want to do any sort of overhead watering. It's far more efficient. It's not dumping tons of water everywhere. So you actually be able to save the natural resource that is our water. It's not this unlimited resource, even though we're able to recycle water. Like there's still limited on how much we have, and we don't want to we don't want to deplete our aquifers. We don't want to deplete our reserves of water. And God knows we don't want to take any more from the municipal system than we need to. And so this answers that question. It's very precise. It evenly waters. It's perfect for that. It ensures like higher quality produce that's coming out because it's not being like totally pummeled with giant drops and getting dirt splashed all over it. And then you have dirty lettuce heads and so on and so forth. So yeah, I really feel like this is going to be a game changer. And then the fact that it's extremely affordable really helps. They're not paying me to say that. So this is a real honest review. Now, I will say I didn't really love that it wasn't plug and play. I kind of hated that I had to go buy a piece and hook it up and do all that. I was really hoping I could just sort of screw it in, set it up, and let it rock and roll. But that's a bit of a con there. And I don't have the reel. You can buy a reel that, you can roll it up onto. And so rolling it back up is a bit of a pain. You basically just have to sit there and walk 100 feet and hand roll it up and then move on to the next one. And then you can basically unravel it and do it all over again. So there's not a ton of cons to it. It's probably not going to be for everybody. I don't know what it does on a 300-foot run. If you had a really long bed, I don't know how it would do. We'll see the longevity of it. Is it going to hold up? Is it gonna spring leaks in it like drip tape does? We'll have to see before we can really put it through its paces. But for as of now, there's not a ton of cons. I think it has a place. It has its necessary application. I probably wouldn't use it in our tunnels. One, because it's a lot longer, which I guess is another thing. Because it's an open hose and it has that sort of block on the end that you feed through it, you theoretically could adjust it to whatever size you want. So we have a 72-foot tunnel. I could theoretically slide that block further up and only use it in 72 feet, not watering 28 feet of empty grass on the outside of the tunnel that I don't have to. But just because it does water so much, and most of the things we have growing in our tunnel, we're trying to keep the water off of them. We're trying to keep them free from all that water, keep them free from disease. It probably won't get used in the tunnels, but I think it has a lot of great applications. And if they could maybe come up with a smaller one. Maybe it doesn't throw it out as much. Maybe you could just do 4 beds or something that might, and it's maybe a little cheaper. That might have some application use as well. So we'll just see. And if you have used the Sumi Soaker, if you've purchased it or you're thinking about doing it, let me know. Tell me what you think about it. Tell me what your pros and your cons are. And if you have any questions, I'm not the expert in it. Definitely reach out to the folks at Modern Grower. And I think Ben Hartman over at Clay Bottom is doing a masterclass or some sort of a demonstration coming up soon. That may have already happened by the time that you see this. And so go over to his Instagram. You can see him talking about it. I know he's been using it for a little while now, and he seems to like it. And he's probably way more authoritative and experienced with it than I am. But yeah, send me your feedback. Send it to Modern Grower. Let them know what you're thinking. And if you haven't got it, really consider checking out the Sumi Soaker. All right. Enough talking about that. Let's get into the final topic for our evening, and that is sort of the day in the life of the farmer's market. So, this was a request that came from a follower that I have on Instagram, a listener to the show, Jano at Eworks Farm. She reached out to me and said, "Hey, love the podcast. If you actually, let's just read what she says. What does she say here? Enjoying your podcast at the moment. One thing that we're all hungry for are tips about market days, setups, flow, problems you've encountered, and tips. Thanks, Alec." So, Jano, thank you so much for reaching out to me on Instagram. And before we get into it, yeah, if you have any questions or any sort of comments, you have questions you want me to answer, shoot me a DM at Crop Culture Farm or send me a DM to the Rookie Farmer podcast. I manage both of those accounts, not particularly well, but I manage both of them. Or shoot me an email at cropculturefarm@gmail.com. And yeah, if you got questions, I'll give them a run. If they're about my farm, if they're about non-farm related topics that you're just curious about, like what's my hair care regiment? I'm just kidding, or whatever it may be, let me know. And more content is always good. And not having to come up with new ideas of things to talk about is always beneficial. So shoot me your questions and I'll try to answer them on the show. But anyways, enough of that. Let's get into Jano's question about the farmer's market. So I figured a day in the life would be the best way to sort of handle it and hit all the beats. So I guess the best place to start would be on Friday. So I do my best to harvest as much as we can the day before our Saturday market. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, it just allows me to schedule my time out better. If I can have one day that is just like solely dedicated to harvest, I can be extremely focused. I'm not trying to balance, all right, well, we got to harvest this. While I'm doing that, that bed's getting watered. And when I'm done harvesting that, that's the right time to go and transplant these tomatoes. It's a lot easier to just be laser focused and say, like, Friday is a harvest day. We don't do anything else but that. And that's more or less what we do. And then it leaves my other days of the week free to work on all the other tasks that need to happen on the farm. Now, I will say, as we're moving into the summer months with a lot of fruiting crops, that's going to begin to change. It's still going to be a pretty heavy harvest day, obviously, but with things like tomatoes and peppers and squash and all the various crops that don't necessarily wait for you to harvest them, they tell you when they're ready. You're going to be harvesting them multiple times throughout the week. That's going to change our sort of harvest rhythm, our market rhythm. Right now, the only one that we're doing that with really is our broccolini and our snap peas. And so those are getting harvested every other day, anyways. So it's one less thing to have to do on Friday. But anyway, so we get everything harvested, we get everything packed up. I've heard stories of people harvesting early in the morning, day of, but we have to leave the farm at 6 a.m. So I'm not I'm already getting out there at like 5:30. And the last thing I want to do is be out there at 4:30 in the morning, super groggy with a headlamp on, trying to harvest herbs or whatever it may be. So I do my absolute best to get everything harvested the day before, everything ready to go. If we're doing something like snap peas, I may not pint everything up, but I'm going to have it, at least enough that's going to go on the table first thing in the morning to like fill out the display. I'm going to get all those already pinted up so that I can just take them out, put them on the table, and boom, we're ready to go. And then the next thing that I do is I pull my truck around inside the fence, inside the gate, right up to the door of our walk-in cooler so that all I have to do is literally open the door, throw everything in the truck, and then boom, we can hit the road. I used to just back up to the gate, which is probably a good 10, 15 yards away from where the refrigerators were. Obviously, we have the walk-in cooler now. And then I would have to carry it across like flagstone pathway, move it on the dolly and do all that because there wasn't really a great place to back my truck up. But now, because of where the cool room is, now where the walk-in cooler is, I can just pull my truck right up there. The back end's right there. I fling open the tailgate, I open up the cover and just throw everything in, throw whatever's left in the back seat, and we're ready to go. So that's Friday. So I absolutely do my best to try and go to bed early. Doesn't usually happen. I'm usually not in bed until probably about now. I think it's 10:55 right now. Recording this a little late tonight. But try to go to bed early. Try to make sure that I can be up and be refreshed and ready to go. One, so that I'm just at my best, but also if I go to bed early, it's going to be less likelihood that I'm going to oversleep. I have yet to wake up late or like oversleep my alarms for a market day, but never say never. I just want to ensure that I can be up on time. I try to lay all my clothes out, get the coffee beans measured out in the coffee grinder so that all I have to do is like heat the water, grind the beans, get the pour over going first thing in the morning, or just do espresso. Try to make my Saturday morning as quick and as efficient as possible so that I can like sleep as long as I can so that I can be as refreshed and ready to go. Plus, like, who wants to wake up unnecessarily early if you don't have to? Yeah, sleep as long as you can. All right. So that's Friday. So now let's get into the actual market day. Alarm goes off at 5 a.m. I'm up, do our necessary get ready in the morning things. I just kind of do one last mental check over. I actually have a checklist that I don't always use that's like to ensure that we have everything. I've forgotten the cash box with all the change and the square reader and all that before. And so we kind of run through the checklist, make sure everything's there so that, once we hit the road, we can just hit the road and go. Do all that, get ready, walk over to the farm to make sure that I'm there by 5:30 in the morning. That gives me enough time to do a quick water of the seed house, open the doors to the seed house, turn the fans on, or at least like turn the timer on so that everything is ready to go. So that while I'm at the market all day long, the farm can still run smoothly. Things are getting irrigated. Things aren't overheating in the seed house. We throw all of the containers into my truck. I would love to have a delivery van, but for the time being, we're just going to keep rocking with the pickup truck as long as we absolutely can. One less added expense of a car note on a delivery van. As much as I would love to have one, maybe one day. Maybe if you guys donate enough to the podcast, we can raise enough money to buy a delivery van. That would be amazing. But until then, the boy can dream. All right, we throw everything in. We do one last check over, make sure tablecloths, all the containers, like all the baskets and things that are going to go on the table, make sure everything's there. That's another thing I should say. I don't really unload most of that stuff, other than the actual containers themselves. Those will come out. The empty containers will come out and get washed. But as far as like my tables and my tent, my dolly, and all of the baskets and my signage and all that sort of stuff, it more or less lives full time in my truck. If that's one less thing or 10 less things that I have to load and unload every single week, I'm pretty much only driving the truck to the farm or to the other farm or running a delivery. It's not like we have to haul around kids in there. And if I do, I'd much rather just take it out one time and then put it back in when I'm done. So yeah, all of our actual like farmers market display stuff pretty much lives in the truck. So we do one last check over, make sure everything's there, and we do our absolute best to hit the road by 6 a.m. So tail lights, we're out of there 6 a.m. We have a 55-minute drive to get to the farmer's market. Thankfully, it's not a bad drive, mostly back roads, kind of state highways. So we're going from New Bern and we're driving all the way up into Athens. We get there. Don't know how everybody's farmer's market is, but we have a bit of a limited window because the loading zone for our market is also set up to be vendor space during the market hours. So those of us who are under the big pavilion, essentially all the growers, we are required to get there in this like sort of 30-minute window. I actually don't even know if I think it's 25 minutes. Yeah, we have this 25-minute window that we can get there, unload all of our stuff, and then go park. And so, it's not like, oh, well, I'll just sort of pull up and if I get there late, whatever. Like, no, if you don't do that, you have to haul all your stuff from the end of the parking lot. So we try to get there no later than 7 a.m. We leave by 6, we get there by 6:55. We get everything unloaded one trip at a time. Really need to get like a dolly, like a pulling like farm cart because I can't just unload exactly where my place is. You have to walk back and forth. We just use a hand truck right now. But we unload everything as fast as we possibly can. Everybody's running mad dash. You know how it is in the morning getting ready for the farmer's market. And then you go and park and you come back and you get everything set up. And so that's pretty self-explanatory. Get your tent set up, tables, tablecloths, set out all your baskets, everything that's going to get stacked everywhere. And then generally, I go with the method of least perishable to most perishable. So if it's going to be a really warm day and we're going to have like sunshine on the tent, it's going to be warming things up. The bagged greens, the lettuces, those sort of things, those are going to be the very last things. We might actually wait until right before market opens to actually pull those things out. We want to keep them cold. We want to keep them as fresh as we can. And a lot of times at those like hot days, we'll just wilt those greens so quickly. So if we can keep them in the coolers, we can keep them in the containers as long as possible. That'd be great. Now, things like turnips, carrots, broccolini, it's fine. We get all that stuff out on the table as much as possible or as quickly as possible. All of our prices and little nameplates out. Do one last sort of once over to make sure everything's good. And then that usually gives us 5-ish minutes before the market opens. And the market I was at last year, it was sort of just on a street corner. So you could just sort of come and go as you pleased. So a lot of times people would show up early. 8:30 people would start shopping when the market opened at 9. So you had to be ready to go early because there was nobody stopping them from just walking up and doing that. Now where we're at, they're very strict about market opens at 8, which means there's a line of people at 7:50 standing there waiting to come in so they can start shopping immediately. And then it starts rolling. So it gives us about 5 minutes. We go run to the bathroom. That's probably going to be the last chance that you have to go to the bathroom for the next 4 hours. And then we come back and we rock and roll. The way that we set our table up is we're on the corner, which means people can come in from the front and from the side. So instead of doing a big U shape we opted for like a longer L shape so that we can get people coming both ways. People actually will use our space as a bit of a pass through. The music's happening and the crowd's getting a little bit bigger, which is great because then they pass through and they take a glance at everything that we have on the table, and then a lot of times they purchase things. Now, I will say, being an extrovert, I feel like is a bit of an unfair advantage at the farmers market. Most farmers that I know are pretty quiet. They're not super personable. They'd much rather be back on the farm, being alone, hands in the soil than they would be at the farmer's market, mixing it up, being super friendly, cracking jokes, all that sort of thing. But I love it. I love being at the market. I love do that salesman thing, shake hands, say hey to people, crack a joke to convince them to buy a turnip, whatever it may be. I love getting to do that sort of stuff. And so I opt to stand on the outside of our booth space. I don't have like my cash box and my square reader, and I'm parked at the back of the tent and I'm just sitting there and waiting for people to come in. I think part of it also is the fact that I am one of the newer growers. So I'm a new face. People don't really know us. They don't really know what we have all the time. And so I also have to be out there to really grab people and bring them in and sort of earn their business. So I set up my cash box at the end of the L so that I'm right there out in the space as people are walking by. I can say something to them. I can very quickly walk right there, restock something, mix it up, do whatever I need to do. And a piece of advice that I was given by Nicholas, the other farmer that I've worked for the last couple of years, he was saying, always look busy, never just stand there. Even if you don't have to restock stuff, move bags around, move lettuce bags around, just flip them around, just freshen things up, look like you're busy, look like you're doing something. And he said something about the energy of just you looking busy draws people in. If you're just standing there, with your hands crossed, your arms crossed, and you're just sort of like staring at people, it gives off this vibe that you're just sort of waiting and you're just there and you're just kind of more hoping that someone will come by. But when you're constantly up and doing this, you're sort of creating the energy of excitement. You're creating the energy of things are happening. And I think even subconsciously people pick up on that. So I'm always moving around. I'm always restocking things. Maybe I'll forget to count my money before the market opens. And so I'll count that real quick. Whatever I'm doing, there's always a buzz. There's always energy happening around our booth. And one thing that I try to do, it gets a little monotonous, but it's just one of my tactics to be as welcoming as possible is I say good morning to every single person that walks by. I can't tell you. One day I'll tally it up. I'll have the little counter thing. I'll count how many times I say good morning to people, but it has to be hundreds of times every Saturday. Even the people that are walking by that don't look at me and they just kind of linger and walk slowly, I'll say, hey, good morning, and catch their attention and sort of draw them in. And you'd be surprised how many people, just by you like looking them directly in the eye and smiling at them and saying good morning and nothing else, will be enough to sort of draw them in and welcome them in. And so you bring them in, and this is where the dance begins, or at least I call it the dance. It's sort of reading the room. It's taking the temperature of the person. Some people are very friendly. You say good morning, they go, hey, good morning. And they're very interactive right out of the gate. Those people, you want to ask them how their morning is going. One of my favorite questions is, what are we drinking this morning? Someone has a cup of coffee. There's coffee vendors or tea tea vendors there. It's just one of those like kind of silly, means nothing questions like asking someone about the weather, but it's very specific and you're asking them about themselves and not about the like, how's the weather out there? It's like we're all experiencing it together, and then it's a chance to maybe you learn something about it. I'm like, oh, it's just a black cup of black coffee. And then you're like, yeah, black coffee, man, me too. And then you create this like sense of camaraderie with each other. And hopefully one of those days he'll remember, like, we have this in common. I should buy from him. Now, I could be completely off base with all of this, but this is just sort of sales psychology that I've come up with in many different venues over the years that I feel like really help. So you're chatting with people, and then there's always the people that kind of want to be left alone. And you have to just sort of ebb and flow, and you talk to someone. If you don't really get a response, you give them space. Because the last thing you want is an overly pushy salesperson trying to convince you to buy the Mizuna greens when you're just trying to figure out which freaking bunch of carrots you want. And so you have to take the temperature and you have to be very aware of the surroundings and understand, what do people want? Do they want to be interacted with? Do they want to be left alone? Another question that I ask when people seem to be lingering or they're just staring. Maybe they're staring off from away from your booth and they're looking at something. I go, "What's catching your eye? You have any questions?" And usually they'll say, "Nope, I'm just looking." And then you kind of leave them alone, let them figure it out. Or they'll go, "You know what? Actually, yeah, what's tatsoi? Tell me about that." And then you have an opportunity to tell them about it. Maybe you can grab an extra bunch, break a leaf off, let them try it, so on and so forth. And so by interacting with customers, I feel like, especially as a new farmer who doesn't have a well-established reputation at the market or just in business in general, you really have to earn every dollar that you make. And, we do that through interaction with our customers. So we're going to be doing that from the moment the market opens at 8. And frankly, we're going to be doing that even after the market shuts down. So when the market's over at noon, even though we may start tearing down, we sort of linger a little bit. We're not like quickly throwing everything in. We're taking our time. You're chatting it up with the people that are walking by because inevitably there's going to be like one or two people who are latecomers. They got there late. They're still perusing, and maybe everyone else has put everything away and you still have a couple of things on the table. Or maybe you don't have anything on the table, but you're just interacting with those people. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, was there something you were looking for?" And they might be like, "Yeah, I was wondering, do you know if anybody had snap peas today?" I'm like, "I got you." You pull the container out, you throw some in a bag, and you sell them the snap peas. And for you, it's $6. It's not gonna make or break your day. But for them, it was like you went out of your way to stop what you were doing, pull out the inventory, and to ensure that they could get what they came for. And once again, you just hope that that builds that rapport, and then next week they come back and they know you have snap peas now. They know that you're a nice person. They know the price, and then they boom, and they come and they get that, and then they get more and they get more. And that's how you earn your customers. Now, back to what our display looks like. I try to keep everything misted. Anything that's green or has a root on it, we're trying to keep it misted so that it stays fresh. It's glistening, it's attractive. I also followed a sort of a pattern because we have things that are bagged. We have like our lettuce mixes, we have arugula, things that are in plastic bags. We have greens, collard greens, tatsoi, whatever that are just bunched, or even broccolini. And then we have our root veg. So, whether it's breakfast radishes, bright red, or it's bright orange carrots, or it's white turnips, or whatever it may be. We essentially have three sort of varieties of product. You have things in bags, things that are green, and then things that are colorful. And so I try to follow this pattern of like plastic green color. So the way that we lay out the table, it's like you don't just have a sea of green in the middle and then some smattering of color on the ends. And we also try to not just have like a wall of plastic bags and then nice fresh stuff on the end, but sort of spread it out to where as they look at your whole booth, they're seeing like beautiful green bunches and beautiful pops of color all throughout the booth. And then they have the bags mixed in. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right way, but for me, it just sort of fills the table out. It makes everything look much more diverse. Maybe it looks like there's more options than there are. Where some of the bigger farms who have been doing this a long time, they have 25 different things on their thing, and we're lucky to get 12. And so it sort of gives the illusion of choice. It sort of spreads things out a little bit. I'll also try to orient things to where the most attractive portion is facing the customer. So with broccoli, we're not facing it to where it's like all florets out. So it's just this like giant mountain of, broccoli florets, and you can't quite make out what a bunch is, and you got to pick it up and you got to wonder. I sort of essentially have it to where it's like, what's going to be the most enticing for someone to just grab it? And so it's like, all right, so we sort of angle them where they're propped up so you can see how long the stems are, how thick the bunches are, how wonderful the tops are. With carrots, it's all about the root. So they're just facing directly outward. We heap them up on the table. We call it carrot mountain. Same thing with the radishes, same thing with the turnips. Most of the root veg, they just get stacked up in big piles, and it's root forward because people aren't buying carrots because they have wonderful tops. They're buying it for those big, beautiful orange roots. And same thing with the bags. Bags they sit up tall and they're lofty, so they look really full, they look really big. And same thing with greens. Everything sort of gets propped up in a way to where it's the most enticing to just grab it. You don't want to have people to have to like hunt through a pile of something to grab the one they want. You just put them oriented just the right way to where they can just grab them and go. And another thing that I do is I always keep an empty part of the table right there where the cash register is. I didn't used to do this, and it was just over time of learning and observing how people, sort of you find the natural behavior that people do. And one of the things is they'll grab all their stuff and then they just sort of like heap it up onto the table wherever there's like some open spot so they can pay you. Some people go ahead and put it in their bag. We don't have baskets yet. I'm hoping maybe we can get some like shopping baskets so that people can sort of load up on that instead. But the last thing you want to do is someone to be holding all their stuff and they're trying to hunt for their credit card or for their cash and give it to you. And so we basically just create an open spot that's sort of like the heaping area. I've got some business cards there. That's where the cash box is. It's where the scale is if we're going to measure something. And that is where I leave that spot so it's comfortable and easy for people to just pile up their stuff. I can sift through, and it's also a great opportunity for me to do a final count on what they have. If someone grabs 2 or 3 bunches of carrots, it's not always obvious. And not that our customers are trying to steal from us. Sometimes they just grab them and they anticipate that you saw it. And so by having everything heaped up in front of me gives me a chance. Maybe I can pick up a bunch of carrots and realize there's a third bunch under there. Or I can do that so that we're ensuring that everything's getting done properly. Or it's to ensure that there is 2 bunches instead of what I thought was 3, and I, accidentally overcharged them. So it's sort of like one final checkout procedure. You can kind of scan everything. Maybe I realize like, oh, somehow there's a bad leaf in that bunch of tatsoi. I'll pull it out, or maybe I'll go get them a different bunch. It's sort of like that last quality control before they pay, and then it's out the door. So people will bring it over, they heap it up in front of the thing, go through it. And with our pricing structure, we have opted to just stick with whole dollars. A lot of the other farms do like 50-cent increments or 25-cent increments. And the last thing I want to do is really just mess with quarters. If someone gives you a $20 bill and it's 16.25, even though that's not difficult math, yeah, it's like what, 375? It's not like the hardest thing in the world to do, but it's just one more thing to have to do when there's a line of people and you're thinking about like, is there enough lettuce on the table and all this sort of stuff to then try to just keep having to do math as opposed to like 16 for, boom, we're done. Transaction's over. And so we do everything in whole numbers, try to keep everything in the $3 to $6 range. And what I mean by that is that like we make bunch sizes accordingly or package sizes accordingly to where everything essentially falls within that range. We'll have a couple of things that might be 2, things like green onions. I like doing smaller bunches for a lower price just so that they kind of become the impulse buy where maybe someone wasn't going to buy a $4 quarter pound bunch of green onions, but they, maybe they'll buy a $2 2-ounce bunch of onions. And so we'll do that and it kind of becomes the impulse buy. But other than that, we try to keep everything in that price range so it just feels very affordable. If you have a $10 bag of salad mix on your table, yeah, maybe it's like a nice big hefty bag and say it's like a half-pound bag for $10, like that's a lot of greens to eat, and it's a pretty good price. It's on the higher end, but it's still a fair price, especially if it's high quality greens. It's like, but man, that's a $10 bag as opposed to doing like maybe a $5 quarter pound bag. And all those numbers add up, and we just want to keep everything in a price range that feels affordable because I feel like people are less concerned about the actual like overall price. They know how much they're getting, but it's sort of that like it's almost like they're buying each thing at a time and thinking like, is this worth $4? Is this worth $3? Is this worth $6? And so if you can make those individual transactional decisions before the final transaction, I feel like you're just making it even more easy for people to want to buy more. Because at the end of the day, as much as we love our 1, 2 item customers, the people that fill up an entire shopping bag full of stuff and it's $50, like we want more of those people. because those are really sort of our bread and butter. So we keep everything in that $3 to $6 range. Tried to do what I call the Jesse Frost method of, was it 1 for 4, 3 for 10? I mean, there's several different methods of doing it, like 1 for 3, 2 for 5. I think that might be one of them. There's all these different schemas out there of how to make pricing easier and to get those numbers up and to sell more product. But it's just sometimes it was hard to get things to fit within that frame. Sometimes maybe you could do a bunch of kale and it was like 1 for 3 or 2 for 5. So really what you're doing is you're selling like a 250 bunch of kale. And you're like, man, that's not a very big bunch to get the price that I need to get. And it just doesn't feel like it's really the best bang for my buck. And so with most things, I've just opted to like, let's do a good size bunch and a good affordable price and let that be the selling point. Now, that doesn't mean that that doesn't work and that I think it's a bad idea. I would love to do it just for whatever reason in our context with the way that we sell and just sort of my ideals. It just doesn't quite mesh with what we want to do. And when I did try it in the past, people seem to not really care. They'd be like, I only want one. I'm like, okay, well then you're paying $3 instead of 250. And so we do Square, Cash App, Venmo, and Cash. Those are our primary ways that we actually handle our transactions. And I don't know how everybody does it. I've seen some people where they just do the math and punch the number into Square and swipe the card. If you've used Square, you understand what I'm talking about. It's like essentially, it looks like a bit like a calculator almost. And you can just punch in a number that you're going to charge someone based upon what they're buying. And then, you hit charge and you swipe or tap or insert their card, and then it does it. And then, they get a receipt or they see it on their bank statement, whatever. For me, I opt to go with the inventory route of where we're actually going and putting in each individual item. So we build the page on the favorites page of here's the 12 to 15 things that we have this week. And they kind of stay in the same spot. So you kind of learn where everything is and you can see it on your phone and just like boom, 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 like arugula, double tap broccolini because I got 2 bunches, triple tap 3 bunches of carrots, and then boom, it's done. And then with cash, if it's a lot of stuff and I'm feeling a little crazy, don't want to do the math in my head, I'll do the same thing. I will say the difference is, we're not charging a processing fee for our cash. We don't have to pay anything. Obviously, we pay sales tax, but that's all incorporated within the price. But we're not actually paying like the processing fee to do cash. So we give our customers not really a discount, because we're not really in the game of discounting things as much as we are in the idea of like, if you want the benefit of being able to use a card, we're going to charge you a small transaction fee. With Square, I think it comes out to right now, it's roughly about 4%. It's like a 3 or 2.6% plus 15 cents per transaction. It fluctuates each week based upon the size of the transactions, but it comes out to roughly about 3.5, 4%. And so we charge a 3% processing fee and, make it clear to our customers. So they buy a bunch of something that's for $4. It comes out to, I can't remember what it's like, 4.12 or whatever. It all the processing is handled in there so that we are not actually having to eat the cost of the processing on Square. At first we opted to just take all of the processing and just eat it ourselves, like make it easy. I would tell customers like, oh no, we'll handle that. It's a part of business, just in the same way the grocery store does, any online business does. Most places are not charging you a processing fee if you're using a card. Until about 6 months in, I started looking at the numbers and seeing how much money we were spending every week. Even when we were doing not a ton of sales, we were spending $150 a month in processing fees. And it was just getting kind of ridiculous that, I'm losing out on $150 a month in revenue because I'm like not wanting to charge my customers an extra 3%. And then when you realize that it's like for a $4 transaction, you're looking at like 6 cents. It's not much. Like for your customer, 6 cents is nothing. But for you, all the transactions of the month, they add up to like $150. And so we made the switch. We made sure our customers knew in advance and we were very outspoken. And then with this market, it's sort of that was the standard right out of the gate. And most people, when they pay with their card, they're not really thinking about the minutia of the cents anyways, because it's all on a card. So they just swipe it and they go and they're on their way. So that more or less handles how we do everything. And I will say one of the last things with the market is that we do not put everything out. We try to put a healthy amount of things. Now, things like carrots, turnips, broccolini, like the things that I mentioned that are not like wilt prone. Yeah, you pile it high, watch it fly. I'll put every single bunch of carrots that I can fit on the table out and just have that view of abundance and just let people go to town on picking out carrots. Things like lettuce heads, we're going to put 4 or 5 of them out. We're going to orient them just right. We're going to keep them misted down so they're fresh, and and we're always going to keep it restocked. So we're always moving. Maybe we'll move a head of lettuce out of the container onto the table, and one of the older ones off the table back into the container, into the humidity, into the cooler temperature with the other stuff in there. And you're just trying to keep the freshest, best stuff presentable to your customers. Because the last thing you want to do is have someone show up at the last 30 minutes of the market and you just have like sad, wilty bunches of collard greens and sad lettuce heads and floppy broccolini bunches or whatever it may be. You want it to be absolutely premium. Like you're charging a premium price. You're trying to convey the quality of what you're selling. And if you're talking about how great your collard greens are and they're just this like sad floppy bunch, like there's a little bit of a disconnect. But if it can be these nice, tall, erect, crisp looking bunches, you almost don't even have to tell it. They can just see the quality. All right. So we've come to the end of the farmer's market day. We've done all of our things. We've gotten all of our sales. We'll count our cash, see how much we have, look at our sales, see where we're at. But what I neglected to mention is that because we're an hour away from the farm, that also means that with some of our restaurant accounts, we're an hour to 45 minutes away from some of our restaurant accounts. Now, I kind of started doing this last year, more or less just by happenstance and convenience. The main restaurant that we were selling to, was right across the street from the farmer's market. So naturally, it just made sense. I'm already walking over there to say, hey, here's what I have extra. Do you want it? So then I just started taking their weekly order to the farmer's market with me. You just take it, it sits in the cooler, or it sits in the shade. It's perfectly fine for a few hours until it goes to the restaurant, and then it's going straight another walk-in. So you're not really sacrificing quality there. And then now that we're in a bigger city with lots of restaurants that love to work with fresh produce, doing the same thing. So we're probably half of our load that is going to Athens is actually not going to be sold at the market. It's going to our various restaurants. So we finish up the market, we get everything loaded back up. Coolers that are or the containers that are going to the restaurant go into the cab of the truck. We crank the AC, we get it as cold as fast as we possibly can to keep that stuff fresh. And then we run our trips to the restaurants. Now we go 30 minutes out of our way to get to one restaurant. And you'd think, well, like, man, why would you go all the way out of your way to do that? But when you do the math and realize if I were to go there on another day and go straight from the farm, it's going to be a 45-minute trip. So I'm actually saving time by doing it on a market day, which means market days are really long, they're really tiring, but we're moving a lot of product on those days. So where, for instance, we'll use this last week as an example. We did about $950 in sales at the market, and then we did about $370 in restaurant orders. It's a good chunk of money, and it's definitely well worth the time. I think the number that I try to follow, and I may need to be updated with inflation and things, but it's essentially like you don't want to drive, like for every hour that you drive for a delivery, you want to charge at least $100. So if you're going to drive 30 minutes to somewhere, you're going to spend an hour in the vehicle for delivery. You need to make sure that they're buying at least $100 worth of stuff. So if I can only go the 45 minutes out of my way, only add an additional 45 minutes to my trip, both there and back and everything, and can make 370 extra dollars, that is well worth the investment, is well worth the time to drive around town to a couple of different restaurants. Plus also, not only on top of the things that they're buying that they ordered ahead of time, but then I can also shoot those same chefs a text and say, hey, we didn't sell out of fennel. I've got 3 pounds left. Do you want it? About an hour before the market's over, I shoot them a list of the expected amounts that I'll have. And obviously, they know at this point that just because that's what I tell them that I'll have, there's a whole hour left in the market. We may run out of stuff. And so I shoot them the list, blah, 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 compile everything together, and then I can go drop it off. So maybe a $200 order to a restaurant can become 250 because they added, 6 pounds of snap peas and some fennel or something like that. So we're just trying to squeeze every last little bit. And it just means that's one less thing that has to come back home and sit in the cooler until next week. And so we're able to, most days, leave completely empty, which means maybe we have one container of 2 lettuce heads and a bag of lettuce and some collard greens that we didn't sell. So we're more or less selling out every week, which is really wonderful. Because the last thing you want to do is be taking a bunch of stuff, not selling it, bringing it back, and then trying to figure out what you're going to do with it for the next week, because most of our business is on one day of the week. You come home, I usually crash, take a nap, and then try to move on with my day. So there you go. That was probably long-winded, and I don't know if you guys really wanted to hear that, but just for Jano, a faithful listener, there you go. There's my tips and tricks and things that I've learned from a year and some change of doing farmers markets. I'm by no means an expert, but hopefully it's an insightful. Maybe you learned something. Maybe you're like, dude, you're totally screwing it up. You need to do this. And if that's the case, please let me know. But I think that's going to wrap up this farm vlog episode. The last one was kind of short. This one's kind of long, so we're kind of balancing everything out. So we're going to get out of here. So huge thanks to Diego and the whole team over at Modern Grower for making this possible. Couldn't do any of it without you. If you need any of your landscape fabric, your row covers, quick hoops, jaying cedars, paper pot transplanters, Sumi Soakers, the 5,000 other things that they sell that I missed, please go over to shop.moderngrower.com. I use a lot of the stuff from Modern Grower, and not just because I'm working with them, but because it's super high quality stuff. And I know that you will appreciate it and it will benefit your business just in the same way that it has mine. So once again, go over to shop.moderngrower.com and go pick up some of the stuff over there. It'll really help you out. And please check out some of the other podcasts from Modern Grower on the Modern Grower Podcast Network. Carrot Cash Flow, Farm Small, Farm Smart, In Search of Soil. There's tons of stuff that Diego is cranking out. I don't know where he finds the time to do it, but he's the OG and he's still rocking and rolling. So yeah, go check out those podcasts. That's probably how you found this. If not, you're one of the few, and go check out those ones and join the rest of the herd over there. And just a reminder, we believe in value for value. And so if you find any information valuable with this, which it sounds like you guys are, we never want to charge for this. We always want to ensure that this can be free for as long as it can be. We don't want to put it behind a paywall. We don't want to make some sort of like the Rookie Farmer Podcast Plus, where you have to get extra stuff for being a member. We just want to make it totally free so that you can be shareable and given to anyone so that we can encourage and empower and educate as many potential growers and future growers as possible. And if you find that sort of value in what we do, please consider kicking some of that value back our way in the form of a monetary donation. You can go to Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, look up at Crop Culture Farm, and you can send us $1, $5, $10, whatever you feel like this is worth, as often as you feel like it's worth it, because your donations coming in really help make this possible and make it sustainable in the long run. So thank you so much. All right. It is late. I'm tired of talking. I can't believe I'm saying that. And I need to get to bed so I can get more stuff done on the farm tomorrow. But with that, thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Rookie Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Alec. And until next time, be blessed. Peace.